My name is Cheryl Blychester. I'm a certified waste management professional. I'm also an environmental property assessor and an environmental safety officer. I'm also a professional engineer in the state of California and licensed. And as such, I'm responsible for protection of human health and the environment. And it's my responsibility to make sure that there isn't any exposure of people to any damage or anything that might compromise their health. And what we've uncovered at this lime kiln site is certainly that. It is very, very, very high pH in exposed slush ponds or settling ponds that are right next to a trail, El Dorado Trail in El Dorado County.
Okay, in my hand I'm showing a picture here that shows an overhead picture that shows the diamond lime plant that was here. It was a processing plant back in the day. It started in 1927 to be in fact. Back when they closed this particular lime plant up, they were starting to clean up a lot of the lime that was around this area and remove it. But Heller Foundation, that owned this particular plant at that time, said no, because it would cost them a lot of money to remove a lot of this stuff. So what they did is they covered it up. They brought in a lot of fill dirt in here. And I think what I was told, it came from Highway 50 when they put Highway 50 in. All that fill dirt went into this area. The problem is you got on this, you're talking about sludge ponds. And this lime sludge is what it is buried in the ground. Now what has happened when they compiled more and more and more dirt on it, this stuff is gone down, it's got into the bedrock, and is leached out into the waterways. This is an area of concern along this walking trail. Up here we've had the old diamond lime processing plant. The problem is this stuff is compiled. They had sludge pits. And what has happened is they put all this dirt on top of this and compiled it, compacted it. And what has happened now, it's leaching out in the bedrock and leaching into the waterway and going underneath the ground and ended up here, which is now leaching out into this little creek area and goes down all the way to Weber Creek. Back in the day also, they had wells that were along this area on Lime Kiln Road. Well, it contaminated a lot of the wells that were here too. And somebody along the line paid for the EID hookup so these people could have water. Where it's flowing from is right in here. You can see the water right here where it's coming out of the ground. It's oozing out right here, and it's coming down this way through this tributary out into this area here and then out. This particular site here, if they plan on building this particular site and put these buildings on, it's going to put more and compress this stuff, and this stuff is going to get into the bedrock and get in the water table, and it's going to leach out, which is doing right here at this particular site here, because you can see where it's leaching out of the ground here. Anyway, these are environmental test strips that are used by environmental engineers to test the pH level of runoff on people's property, and they use this especially, and it gives you an accurate figure of what's kind of going on. If you notice, this test strip right here is between 13 and 14, and at Drano is at 13, so it's very highly, in pH levels, and this is very much an environmental concern. Above 12, it classifies as hazardous waste. That means it has to be removed. It has to be removed from the site.
It was first called to my attention by members of the El Dorado County Solid Waste Commission. And I think it's their board that they have that oversees the MRF. The MRF is sitting on a historic lime kiln site that's in the drainage for the watershed for Weber Creek. And it's my understanding, I was called because they were having an issue with the county environmental staff who serve as their staff for their board. And apparently an issue about lime kiln waste being discharged in the past from this particular location came up during a board meeting, and the environmental staff had been refusing to put notes about it into the official minutes of the meeting, and the board members were concerned about it. They had received during a public board meeting information about discharge from that site during an illegal grading operation at that former lime kiln. And that discharge had caused high pH materials in a sludge form to flow across the site and then across what I believe is El Dorado Trail and then down towards Weber Creek in the drainage. At that time, I understand there was a number of agencies that came out and sampled and verified it, and there was a cleanup that progressed. I came to a meeting afterwards to discuss some sampling that was done at that time, and we're talking about April of 2015. I came there cold without any background on the site, and I was just listening as an environmental professional to see what the county had to say about this past hazardous waste release. The county denied any knowledge of it. The county said that they didn't have a case officer available for it. The county said that they, and by the county, I mean specifically Greg Stanton and Barbara Houghton, I think both of them said that they didn't have any right to go on private property to sample, despite the fact that the county was looking to purchase this area of the property for right-of-way. And so I couldn't believe it, because these are the people that are charged with protecting human health and the environment in the county, and they were going out of their way to feign ignorance of anything that had happened there. So I wrote up everything that happened at the meeting without any background to it, just what I observed at the meeting and how the behavior of the environmental managers, and I sent it to each one of the county supervisors and to all the people at the meeting. There were 13 people at the meeting from state and local agencies. I did look into online to see what I could find out about it. It was after the meeting and after the fact, but I found a geotechnical investigation that was done in 2008 that uncovered sludge ponds directly underneath the MRF site and from some other locations. The report I read was attached to an EIR from the Diamond Dorado Center, which is, I suppose, a shopping center that was planned for this area. That grading operation that released the sludge came from grading operation that was performed without a permit at that Diamond Dorado site. And it's my understanding that at the time, it led to a cleanup, but at the time, the environmental people performing the cleanup did not know that there had been sludge ponds discovered in a geotechnical report. They knew that they had a caustic material on their hands when they had the sludge, and the pH at the time of the laboratory analysis of the pH was at 11.89. That's very, very high. Anything above pH 10 will burn your skin and cause skin irritation and is a human health hazard. Above 12.5 is considered hazardous material, corrosive hazard. And so it was causing chemical burns. They analyzed it. The thing about analyzing pH, especially for a lime kiln site, is that the longer it's exposed to air, the more the pH goes down. Well, if this pH was at 11.89 in a geotechnical lab hours, if not days later, then it had been at quite a bit higher pH when it was actually sampled. The EPA says that you must sample pH within 15 minutes of taking a field sample, and that laboratory analysis for pH needs to be flagged as out of compliance. It's not the protocol for EPA sampling and analysis. So normal stormwater professionals take samples for pH using color strips that give you an idea to the half integer pH mark. So to not 13 or 13 and a half, or 14 is the highest that it would go. And so the pH strips that were taken during the recent storm events over the last 2 weeks by stormwater professionals came in at 13.5 and higher. And so this was immediately reported to the stormwater department at Dorado County. We thought that was also the environmental management department, but apparently they are not in the same unit, which is curious in itself. But the stormwater people reported it to environmental management at the county, and the county went out and sampled it. Simultaneously, we reported it to the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the California State Fish and Wildlife Service. So the State Water Board believed that paving over the lime at the site, the dry lime at the site, which is quick lime in many places, was sufficient to separate the pathway of this caustic material getting to human health and the environment. They didn't know that there were sludge ponds that were active under the site that had been there since the 1970s at least. It's material that will slump, so any roadway or buildings that you put over a sludge pond is just going to slump down, and you're going to have a structural problem. There's been reports that high quicklime, that high pH lime material from the kiln, has been mixed in with bunker C oil, and that is why it's still there many, many years later and still a problem. It was capped. When they did grading at the site, they broke the cap and broke into the sludge, and that's what flowed across the property. And that can't be remediated by just pouring asphalt over it. It has to be removed. The Fish and Wildlife sent a warden out, met the county out there. They sampled it together on a Monday, got pH of 12.7. They went back out the next day and got pH of 12.8, both of which are hazardous. Immediately, imminently hazardous to human health and the environment. They walked away from the site and did nothing. They didn't mark it. They didn't cordon it off. They didn't provide any physical barriers for animals or dogs that are walking, wildlife or dogs or people, children and bicycles falling off the trail there. I became pretty alarmed and started calling more people. I called the emergency management response line for Dorado County, and the fire department there said that they report hazardous material spills to the same people at the Dorado County Environmental Health. So I called them directly, spoke to Greg Stanton. He told me that this is on a Friday, 5 days later from their original sampling, that they were going to go out and post a sign. And the sign said something like contaminated water. That's not the appropriate signage for this kind of hazardous waste. This kind of hazardous waste needs to report a corrosive material, corrosive to skin, and it would be corrosive to animals. So the level of pH that we're talking about is think of lye. 13.5 is what lye comes in at, or Drano, and it's more caustic, would burn you more than oven cleaner would. So when the caustic material, pH, this high pH material, hits your skin, it starts forming a mass that starts becoming gelatinous, like jelly, and it'll start melting your skin. The amount of a chemical burn, the amount of damage and disfigurement that a chemical burn will cause depends on the concentration and the duration of contact on your skin. So the problem with caustic burn versus an acid burn is that you don't feel it right away, and so you don't know that you need to be rushing to go wash it off of your skin. And so I'm sorry to say that some of the people that were out there sampling and not taking top precautions have in the past been burned by this material at this lime kiln site. And this signage certainly isn't going to protect wildlife, and it's not going to protect children. Dogs would start getting burning on their paws and start licking their paws and then get it internally. That's how that kills them. I asked Greg Stanton, when he told me he had people going out there, this was 5 days later, and I called him to say it appears nothing's been done, and it's now Friday morning from an original Monday morning report. And what are you planning to do? And he said, I've already sent people out there. and they're going to post a sign. And I said, are you aware that the dogs and the tree squirrels and the deer cannot read the sign? And he said, are you asking me if I know that squirrels can't read? And I said, yes. Do you know that squirrels can't read? And he said, yes, I know squirrels can't read. And I asked him how he thinks that that's protective of the environment then. He said he believed that he was doing sufficient action to protect human life, and that that's all he needed to do. When I talked to my analytical lab that I use in all of my environmental work about this high pH and what they thought of it, they were amazed that an environmental management would walk away from a site and not leave somebody there to caution passersby while they ran and got exclusionary fencing material to make sure that everybody stayed out of it. So even something simple like a silt fence around it would have been a 3-foot high barrier that people would have known not to trench through it. Environmental County Health told me that they didn't feel that they had the right to walk onto the property to do anything about it. They told me in April that they didn't have the right to do any sampling there. They told me recently in the past weeks that they didn't have any right to cordon off any material that they thought it was on private property. It certainly is at least partially or immediately adjacent to a public right-of-way accessible by all members of the public. That's my problem with it.
On January 26, 2016, declarations were made to the Board of Supervisors of El Dorado County. You know, George Narbu, El Dorado County concerned citizen. We've had a problem, I imagine you probably already know about it. You've already read it. The environmental concerns about the toxic high pH levels that are leaking in and going through the property alongside the walking trail and then adjacent to the property owner's property and then into Weber Creek. This has been an ongoing thing, but I don't want to go into a history lesson right now because it would take quite a while. But I've been pursuing this thing for a long time, and I've got all the facts and documentations to prove what I have with this particular area. We have pH levels, and there's a 32-page report here that I'm going to hand to you guys right now, and it shows all the test strips. The pH levels were between 13 and 14. That's high. At 12, you start losing your skin.
Dr. Weidmer has sent each of you a letter that I don't know if you've received it yet, but I agree with his statement that this ongoing gross neglect of the health and safety of the public is deplorable. Maybe we need to move this is from me, maybe we need to move Environmental Management Division out of the Development Services and back to the Health Department where it will not be under pressure to minimize health risks for the sake of development. The board's responses to the grand jury make it clear that this county favors so-called economic development for a special few at the expense of public safety. As the ultimate decision makers in the county, the buck stops with you. Now that you're aware of the situation, you will be held accountable for any harm that comes to the public based on your inaction to deal with this hazard.
Within an hour after the declaration, county employees, some in hazmat suits, were dispatched to the Diamond Dorado Bike Trail hazardous waste area. Later, an unidentified employee from the materials recovery facility confronted the videographer.
Yeah, we don't allow videotaping or photos on the property.
The videographer was on a public right-of-way, not in the facility, and not interfering with operations. Later the same day, January 26, a barrier was placed in the seepage area next to the bike trail. It should be noted that this barrier will not add to public safety. The seepage is in fact not behind the barrier. Additionally, the signage indicating private property is in fact within the right-of-way of the bike trail. This barrier seems to provide at best only a public relations function. This barrier will not prevent animals from entering the area. The following day, January 27th, county employees were seen on the private property of the illegal grading site. When asked for clarification as to why they were now allowed to investigate on private property, here was their response.
Yeah, we're just investigating the site is all.
Thank you. Sorry.
I read the grand jury report that came out for 2013 and 14, and it sounded as though they were specifically talking about this and that the county knew far more about it than they confessed to me when we had our meeting in April of 2015. They feigned complete ignorance of it. They told us they had no idea about any historic lime kiln site. They told us that they had no case officer that was working on a lime kiln site, historic lime kiln site. And they certainly did know about it. And Greg Stanton just last week told me that he had no reason to believe that this high level pH, just downgrading it from the former lime kiln site, was coming at all from any former sludge ponds, lime kiln site sludge ponds. So he's trying really hard not to know this, I think. So not only did the county have the ability to go out and sample and order sampling, they were responsible for the mitigation measures for the EIR during that illegal grading operation that went on, and they needed to have that report filed with the Diamond Dorado Commercial Center documentation for the EIR, and it needs to be accessible for the public for public review. They haven't even started a file. They told me that they didn't have such a file opened and that they weren't going to open a file like that until more grading went on at the site. It's also my understanding that the Department of Fish and Wildlife has filled out several scientific reports about the high pH and about the dangers of this lime kiln site, and they've turned it in to El Dorado County and the El Dorado County DA to the point that they're just exasperated by the lack of action by the county. They don't know why the county is not taking action. And the idea that environmental professionals, never mind county officials charged with protecting human health and the environment, would sample, know that they're talking about toxic levels of high chemical skin burning levels of material and walk away from it and do nothing about it is unconscionable to me.
I'm Dr. Kurt Weidmer, and I'm the former County Health Officer, Director of Health Services for El Dorado County. I was in that capacity for almost 20 years. So lime is a caustic alkali, and my understanding is it's there widespread extensively in many parts of the site. And now it's an effluent is coming out of the bank, and it's yellow, it's turbid, it's flowing into a stream that's a tributary of Weber Creek. The walking trail is right adjacent to the site that I just described. There's very easy access for children and anyone else or animals to get down into this area where the caustic alkali exists. My understanding is that the grand jury looked into this several years ago, published a report recommending that the hazards be addressed, and they've been not pushed aside. Those responsible have looked the other way. The plan is for a Diamond Springs bypass road to be put through, and then retail commercial development, so big bucks are involved. And my experience in the past is that environmental health was under my direction when I was county health officer. A wealthy developer wanted to push through a big development. where the soil on septic systems where the soil conditions did not perk, totally, completely unsuitable for septic systems. And pressure built on me on environmental health to approve this subdivision. I wouldn't do it because it would result in contamination of the waters, the groundwaters, the streams. Two members of the Board of Supervisors and others met with me trying to get me to back down and to approve this totally inappropriate, potentially hazardous development. Because I wouldn't bend, they moved environmental out from underneath me and put it in Department of Transportation or someplace else, and the subdivision was approved. So as Sue was saying, environmental health should be in the health department, not in the community development agency. It's ludicrous. And a health officer, a physician health officer, can give the backing to environmental health to hold the standards and to mitigate and abate hazards. This has not happened in this current situation. Environmental health was put under the community development agency a couple of years ago when this problem was beginning to foment. And it looks to me like it's the same situation that I've observed in the past. If the Board of Supervisors, under pressure from wealthy developers, if they can't get what they want, if the health department or environmental health won't cave to them, then they will reorganize and put it in an agency where they have more power, and the person in charge is less able to stand up to the pressures from the board.
Finally, Dorado County is covering up its problems by paving over hazardous caustic waste and by bureaucratic maneuver. In fact, the Diamond Springs Boulevard bypass will cost over $42 million. Its sole purpose is to direct traffic to the Diamond Dorado big box strip mall. Big box retail is seen as a cash cow for county finances. The county will receive a 1% portion of sales tax from this strip mall. The big box retail's profits will be extracted from the county. The small 1% tax rate will not cover the physical and social infrastructure subsidies necessary to mitigate the project's impact. It will also put many small businesses at risk. If the county has its way, retail employees will be working over toxic waste. Consumers will be driving and parking over toxic waste. And the citizens, as taxpayers, will be paying the mitigation bills. It's time to put people, the local economy, health, and well-being before profits. As of February 9th, 2016, no adequate safety or mitigation measures have been taken.